Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Helen Gibbs, registered dietitian working in Dunedin, New Zealand, my business being diet consulting. And what I was going to be starting to do is some regular vlogs. This is because when I type blogs, I spend forever correcting my grammatical things. At least when I'm speaking, I hopefully make a bit of sense and I'm not having to do lots of correcting. So this is the second of this series that I'm starting. I would like to regularly do this. Realistically, I have to have time around my patients and I have to find papers that I think are worth sharing with you. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the second paper, and I am recording this back to back with my first one, hopefully getting a little bit of a buffer on it. So this is about a recent news report that started trending around ketogenic diets and heart disease. So with the recent concern about erythritol, which I've done in the other vlog, I was really unsurprised to see an article come up on the health risks of ketogenic diets and the fact that it started trending across the mainstream media. When these come up, I usually find a colleague. I really love my colleagues. They go, particularly the academic ones, and they've got access to journals. I say, can you get me a copy of that? So if it's behind a paywall, I get a sneaky copy. Why do I do that? Because I actually want to see who did it, how they did it, what the methodologies are, all of the bits that actually get missed when you're looking at news reports. So this study was presented at a conference, okay? So it means it's not been peer reviewed. So why is peer review something that us scientists, because dietitians are scientists at the end of the day, or we're evidence-based practitioners, we talk about it a lot. Peer review is important because at the simplest level, you can make mistakes when you're doing a big project. And because you're so close to that project, you might not spot that mistake until it's got to publication. And oh my goodness, that can be a complete and utter disaster. I've peer reviewed a fair bit for my profession. My partner is a statistician and he's done it a lot. And we've had a talk about this process and how sometimes you hope your comments as a reviewer are going to kill a paper that should never have seen the light of day. What you're trying to do is be consistent in your criticism and perhaps guide them to improving the paper or why they should be withdrawing it. So what happens now with high quality research, so that's at the high level of academic stuff, there's often a several stage process in developing protocols, and we now see the publication of protocols at big trials so that that can be peer reviewed before they go and spend the money on the trial. And that is actually an excellent way to spot fundamental flaws and methodologies and things that could later cost expensive mistakes. One of the funny things that my partner reminded me of was he, as a statistician, likes to see how they're going to analyse the data, because he looks and he goes, well, I wouldn't do that if it wasn't me. Or he might go, oh, that's interesting. So their power equation, which is the idea of working out how many people they have to be able to see a statistical difference, he goes, hey, yeah, no, that's fair enough. Or, you know, it's a process that is a learned process and it's got a certain way of being done. Second thing that's important to say about this particular study is it's a study using what we call secondary data. So they're taking it from previous work by someone else who collected the data for other purposes. These studies, they're often called retrospective cohort studies or retrospective population-based studies. So they're looking back at data and they're saying, can we find an interrelationship between two things? Okay. Now, what we have to do if we're doing that and looking at population subgroup A and subgroup B, is we have to control for things that we know are going to have an impact on that condition. So let's do this slowly. Say we're looking for condition C in groups A and B, and we think it might be related to nutrient D. Okay. We then need to think what other things could be causing condition C. The really classic one, and it's done very routinely now, is we look at the impact of smoking, okay? So smoking is one of the conditions that, for example, leads to heart disease. And there is a strong, well-known link between the risk of smoking and the risk of heart disease, regardless of how many aunties live to 99 and smoke every day, okay? We must control for the impact of smoking in different populations. So if population A and population B have different rates of smoking, we have to say, how can we make sure that there is no mathematical difference? So we can look at the effect of nutrient D, okay? I can't read the study until it's published, or I may get to see an abstract from a conference journal. One of the reasons that they sometimes do this is it's a fast way of getting information out, and it counts towards getting grants. So, but I assume, because I sort of did a wee fosk around and figured out which group had done it, they actually probably done a pretty good job of controlling for variables. They do know what they're talking about, this group who's published this. The other weakness of the study is it's trouble that plagues me as a clinical dietitian as much as the researchers in nutrition. When we want to know what someone eats, we have to rely on them to tell us. And in human nature, that's actually really hard. And it's not through wanting to be evasive. You know, yes, I see people with whakama, with shame about what they eat, but actually quite often it's just because we don't remember, because it's habitual behaviour. So there's quite a number of different methods that you use to collect data about food in these big sort of studies, okay? And they all have strengths and weaknesses, and there are ways of controlling for some of those strengths and weaknesses, but it's actually quite hard to know how good the data is. And even me, dietitian, lots of experience, if I go into a clinical trial, I'm useless because I actually will change my food behaviour because I have to write the damn thing down. And so that I'm not giving a reliable outcome. And I know this stuff. So it's an interesting thought. Many people, particularly in the ketogenic low carb world, dispute the strength of the relationship between LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and heart disease. And some of the naysayers say that it's more important how much sugar is circulating. Their hypothesis is that the sugars that are circulating in your blood get stuck to the proteins, okay? And that does happen. And the cells become sticky because of these bits of sugar that are sticking out from their proteins, okay? Their hypothesis of sugar getting stuck to cells is called glycolysis. And I say on an individual basis that some people probably have a greater risk for heart disease from glycosylation of proteins. And some people probably have a greater risk of heart disease from the presence of LDL cholesterol, particularly if you have a specific type of LDL cholesterol, which is genetically determined. However, on average, I still favour that the elevated cholesterol, the presence of elevated cholesterol, probably is the greater of the two risks. Again, it's stuff we're learning over time. Adding to the mix of this, and part of why I'm willing to say that, is because we don't have any studies of populations eating a ketogenic type diet for a long period of time that we can look at death outcomes. That's going to be 20, 30, 40 years into the future. This is 11-year data, okay? We're starting to collect it, but it's still not there, okay? So we can't tell for certain, but I'm still falling on the favour of the LDL cholesterol. This study says there's a big increase, and it is statistically a big increase, of fatal heart events with people who've been following a ketogenic diet for 11 years compared to a population that hasn't been following that. But this leads to the last point, and it's a point we've got to think about when we're talking about diet, because diets are never black and white. They're often very much shades of grey. How good was that ketogenic diet? How much of the time were they in ketosis? How well did they follow that diet? Now, in papers that I could actually talk about, and it's actually in my list of favourite papers from 2021, is a paper that looked at something that quite by accident happened in a nutrition study during lockdown. They got people to do ketogenic diet for 6 weeks. They gave them food for 3 weeks to do it, and then they got them to do it themselves for 3 weeks. They gave a week's washout. They gave them a vegetarian diet for 3 weeks with the food provided, and then for 3 weeks, they got them to do it themselves, okay? So that measured their normal diet before, did the intervention, measured while they had the food with them, while they were doing it themselves, week's washout, they just checked that actually they're going back to normal, doing the other diet. Or they could have been the other way around, so doing the vegetarian first, ketogenic second. Okay, so we've got these two groups that they cross over. So all subjects do both diets. Then the next step after that, which was really interesting, was they said, decide you're going to follow which one. We don't mind which one you follow, but decide you're going to follow which one. And in 2 months' time, we're going to follow up and do another food diary. At that point, we'll ask you what diet you're following, but we're not going to give you any feedback about how good or bad it is, but that's what we're looking at longer term. So these people, they'd be pretty much, they did split down mostly half vegetarian, half keto after it. Interestingly enough, it was often the second diet they did that they continued on with. There's a lot about behavior and convenience and practice and things in that. And 2 months down the track, these people, when they had their food looked at, they were actually closer to their original diet right back at the beginning, so their habitual eating, than they were to whatever diet they said they were. But they were adamant that they were following the diet that they said they were following. Human behavior, not a criticism, it just is a fact. Okay. So where do I stand on keto diets? I still maintain that the best diet is the one that you can stick to. With ketogenic diet plans, there is a benefit of looking at dietary quality, just as there is a similar benefit at looking at a diet quality for a non-ketogenic approach. So diet quality really, to put into a very simple nutshell, is saying, okay, how good are the foods we're eating and how close to their natural state are they? How much of the diet is as unprocessed as possible, okay? I also believe that it's worth screening for cardiovascular risk, particularly if you're going to follow one or the other diet, and look at cholesterol profiles and HbA1c, which is our measure of glycosylation, and discuss risk management. So if people are saying to me, hey, I want to follow a ketogenic diet, I want to follow a vegetarian diet, I want to follow an Uncle Tom Cobley and all diet, I will say, right, well, we need to get your GP to do a cholesterol test after you've followed it for a few months, and let's just see what's happening. There might be another couple of tests that I'd also recommend doing, but it's really cholesterol and HbA1c that we're talking about in relation to the study. And we look, and then we say, hey, your cholesterol's gone up a bit, your HDL, which is the good guy, to total cholesterol ratio has varied a bit, your HbA1c, has it really dropped? You know, actually look at it and reflect and talk, okay? I'm not going to tell them one way or another. I might say it is my strong opinion, but I won't say you've got to, because at the end of the day, people are adults and they use their noggins, okay? So there is something really important to understand about nutrition, and I think it's missed a lot. So as well as lifestyle factors, so that's the amount of activity you do, the food you eat, the sleep you get, the alcohol you don't drink, smoking you don't do, whatever. Those lifestyle factors are one part, but our genetics and our microbiome and our epigenetic condition are another thing entirely. And I sometimes say to people, you've just had some dodgy genes. And no matter how good your diet is, you're going to probably need some medical help to stay healthy as you get older, because your risk factors, by the calculations we do, are elevated, okay? So this can be a real hard thing for some people to hear. Look, I have lived experience of being a disabled person, and so I'm kind of okay about the fact that I'm probably going to need medication to stay healthy for most of my life. I don't really like it. It's just part of being me. But if you've grown up in a culture that says, oh, you know, it's all about willpower, it's all about what you do, it's all about what you put into your body, It can be a bit of a nasty shock to find that actually you just lucked out on the genetics or the epigenetics or your microbiome, and there may not be enough change that you can do to ensure that you're going to have as much chance of a healthy long life as possible. So one of the things I often say to people is, hey, nutrition is one bit of the picture, but that's why we work alongside doctors. That's why we work alongside, in my case, a surgeon, because sometimes we need additional support to have long and healthy lives. So I hope that was interesting. If you like it, please share. I am always willing for suggestions about what else I could cover. Honest truth is that I'm trying to keep off social media as much as possible other than things post. So if you want to communicate with me, probably best to email me. I hope you all have a really great day. I'm just coming up to the end of my week. Thursday is my busiest clinical day, but we just had a quiet day today. So I thought, let's get these done. Coming up to the end of my professional year. And so that means that I'm having to report on all of the learning I've done, because as dietitians, we're expected to do lifelong learning, and we have to submit evidence for that before we get registered each year. Hope everyone is well. Ka kite anō, ina hora.